Jesus, when he was teaching and living here amongst us, when he was going around different places, he frequently got interrupted. He would have one agenda set for his day, and then somebody comes along and just disrupts everything. And sometimes the interruptions were not that welcome. Somebody interrupts him to criticize him or to give him a hard time. And other times it was obvious that it was going to go a good place. People interrupt him to tell him how great he is or how much they love him, or I mean, everybody loves those kind of. But often you kind of got a glimpse of Jesus through the interruptions and how he thought and how he processed. And when we look at Jesus, of course, we know what God's thinking and how God processes. There's a lot interesting about studying Jesus and understanding the heart of God, just how he responded to when people came and gave him attention. So there's a story in Luke 7. Just want to kind of focus on that for a second. It says when Jesus had finished saying all this, and the all this goes back to Luke 6, and it's something called the Sermon on the Plain. It's kind of the same content a lot as the Sermon on the Mount, but it's a long teaching, kind of explaining what the kingdom looks like, how the people who you think would be out of it, or maybe the most important, the servants are the greatest, and the ones who seem like they're losing, those are the ones that God is treasuring, and how he asks us, God does, to love him and to show mercy like he does, and kindness and grace like he does. Well, anyway, he's been saying all this. Jesus has been. He's been teaching all these things, and he's coming to Capernaum, and that's kind of his home base. That's where Peter apparently lives, and that's kind of where Jesus kind of makes his operating center. And while they're there in Capernaum, the centurion's a servant whose master valued highly was sick and about to die. And the centurion heard about Jesus, and he sent some elders to Jesus, of the Jews, to him, asking him to come and heal the servant. Now, this story pops up in Matthew too. And when Matthew tells it, he says the centurion approaches Jesus. But Luke's account's probably the more accurate one. Matthew's shortening it, making it briefer, because Matthew does that a lot. But Luke here's kind of giving you the whole detail. It wasn't actually a centurion who came; it was his idea. But he actually sends some of the leaders of the Jews, right? He actually sends some people who are well regarded by the Jewish community, and I guess he's hoping probably well regarded by Jesus to go ask. And this centurion, it's a Roman, and as like the name implies, centurion, centa means 100. He's in charge of about 100 men, and he's been sent there to help subjugate and conquer this area of Palestine that he wants it to be ruled by the Romans. And a lot of the Romans were just despised by the Jews. It was a conquering, occupying army. And when this guy was first assigned, to go and serve in Israel, it's a hot area. It'd be like today if a soldier had to go serve in Afghanistan or someplace like that, how scary, going to kind of a hot area might be. That's the same sort of thing here. And a lot of times because of that, the Romans came in real hard and real physical, and we're quick to kill people, used terror to keep everybody in line. But this centurion, he seems a little different. He's a soldier. And so, there's some stereotypes of how soldiers are, and you can imagine some tough guy and a guy who responds well to order, and in our day maybe has the crew cut there, but he's different than some of the guys who the stereotypical Roman centurion. He cares about his slave. That whole culture is different for us. We don't have slavery like that, and we look at slavery as such an unimaginable wickedness. But they didn't look at it like that. The centurion didn't, and really the Jewish people didn't. They just part of life. You had slaves, and that people weren't equal, right? And Jesus had just spent a whole sermon on the plain talking about how the kingdom is different, and the ones who are at the bottom might really be at the top. And he's talking about how the world is going to change because of him and because of his teaching. And now here's this centurion, and he's seen by most people as the very top of the food chain, and he's got a slave, and a lot of times the Romans, if a slave just couldn't work, either you let him go if you were kind, go figure it out, man, I'm not paying for you to eat if you're sick, or you'd kill him. And Romans, free men had a right to kill their slaves. And a centurion would have had more right probably than a regular freeman. But he cares about him. He cares about this slave, even though everybody else would have seen him as second class. This guy cares about him. And he's able to talk to these elders like they're friends. So he's not really what you'd expect. And when those elders, when they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly. I mean, they don't just ask like, okay, this guy told us to go do it, so we're doing it. I mean, they're begging Jesus, you need to do this, Jesus. You know, some of these guys might not even really believed in Jesus, but it's important to this guy, so it's important to them, and he deserves you to do it because he loves our nation. Built our synagogue. I mean, we kind of owe the dude. And so here's a centurion who gets assigned to go to this hot area, but he loves it. He loves the people. He loves how they think. He loves how they operate. Now he's got a slave who's sick, and he's concerned about that slave. Centurions actually is kind of a subtle thing. They always come off looking pretty good in Luke. I don't know why that is. There's a centurion named Cornelius who's one of the first Gentile to get the Holy Spirit and be changed. There's a centurion at the cross who says, surely this man was the Son of God. The centurion sees it when nobody else does. And now you've got this centurion, and there's good in him, right? He's there for a hard purpose, but these elders don't really hold it against him. Here's a guy who's been doing it right, Jesus. He deserves it. And so Jesus goes with him. He didn't really even argue about it. Okay. And so Jesus goes with what Jesus had planned that day. Whatever it was, he's, okay, we'll go do it. And he wasn't far from the house when the centurion sends friends to him. So again, the centurion doesn't go to Jesus, right? And you could read that like he thinks he's too good for Jesus, but that's not how the rest of this shows. I mean, it just seems like he's almost embarrassed. Like, I know what kind of a sinner I am, Jesus. And he goes, I don't even deserve to have you under my roof. I mean, the Jews believed to go into a Gentile's house made them unclean. And it's like this guy's almost showing respect for that. You would be unclean. He says, come into my house. I'm a mess. So here's this guy that everybody talks so highly of, but he's real humble. He doesn't see himself that way. And I don't even consider myself worthy to come to you. But you say the word, Jesus. You say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority. And I've got soldiers under me, and I tell this one go, and he goes. I tell that one come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. So soldiers, I understand authority. I've got commanders above me and people under me, and I understand the chain of command. And so what he's saying to Jesus is, I know you're in charge. I don't know how he knew that. I don't know if he'd been hearing Jesus preach. Maybe he heard him in that sermon on the plain. Maybe he's heard this vision of a kingdom where the slave will be lifted up and the rich will be brought down, and he sees his place in that, and he wants to be a follower of Jesus, and he knows he's a mess. And I see it, Jesus. Later on, Jesus will say about himself, all authority in heaven and earth been given to me. But a lot of guys don't get that, but this guy gets it. He's not a Christian. We aren't any Christians yet. He's not a Jew, but he gets it. And Jesus, it says, when Jesus heard this, he was amazed at the other guy. And he turns to the crowd and he says, I've not found such great faith even in Israel. And he's not really putting them down. He's not putting down the Israelites. He's really commending this other guy. Why? Because he sees it. And he's living his life like he sees it. And so he tells the guys who had been sent, they go back and they find the servant well. Jesus gives the word, and it's all taken care of. And again, you get the sense it's taken care of because of this centurion's, because of his faith. He has such a faith, to believe in what Jesus will do and what Jesus could do, and Jesus blesses it. And Jesus makes it work out right. And it's such a cool story. I sometimes don't feel worthy of him. I look at some of my stuff I do and stuff I think and ways I act and what goes through my head. And I know that I've not got it right. And I think if I had to stand in front of God and his holiness, I'd just shrink like a worm. I know who I am. And I really identify with this centurion and how he acted. But I think Jesus' response to the guy is really cool. First of all, he's amazed because people aren't normally humble like that. Not really. I might say something like, I'm just a mess, but I don't want you telling me I'm a mess, right? I don't want you to agree with it. I want you to say, oh, no, you're doing great. So I think that's interesting. He's amazed, but he's also amazed because the guy gets it. What's he get? He understands that Jesus has authority. So when I tie myself to Jesus, I'm not putting my faith in my worthiness because I know where I'm at. I'm putting my faith in His authority. Person might get to the end of their life and say, I'm not sure I've been good enough. And the answer, of course, is you've not. But He's good enough. And He's strong enough. And He'll make it right.